So, as everyone here knows, AI is one of the defining trends of our time, and the space has grown really quickly in the last few years. AI applications are popping up at an incredible rate across industries and many use cases, as you can see here, languages, coding, content, and so forth. And this, in turn, has led to a huge investment in the ecosystem needed to build AI applications. But as a business, how do you figure out the right infrastructure, tools, and models to build these applications to support your customers in the real world? How do you ensure things like security, privacy, and authenticity in this black box model world? And essentially make sure you can get models into production efficiently and securely. So today, we're going to talk about these questions and many others with leaders who have successfully navigated this landscape. So we'll talk to both experts and practitioners across areas like healthcare, security, retail, and many other industries. So, with that, we'll get started. Just one piece of logistics. We won't be taking questions today during the panel since we have a pretty tight schedule, but everyone should be available at the end of the day during the networking session if you have questions. And with that, we'll get started with our first panel. Oh, there you go. Okay, perfect. You guys can come up.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name is Liat Ben-Zur, and today we're going to have a panel about AI in the enterprise. So I thought I'd start by just doing a little introduction of our panelists here. We have Elif, who's Global Head of Product at AtScale. Elif's innovations have led to patents for search and conversational analytics, data analysis, data management, and more. Her research and technology development for augmented intelligence has led to the rise of third-generation analysis, and she was also named the winner of Business Intelligence Group's Artificial Intelligence Excellence Awards program. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have DV. DV's the CTO of Alteryx. With more than 20 years of technical experience in data and machine learning, DV's demonstrated real-world technical prowess in cloud-native analytic technologies and the broader cloud ecosystem. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And last, we have Srini. Srini, most recently, was head of engineering at Marketo and Adobe. And he's an expert in AL and ML, cloud engineering, enterprise security, and compliance. As head of engineering at Adobe, he was responsible for technology strategy, innovation, big data analytics, and generative AI services. So very relevant.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. So my first question is actually going to go to all three of you. I always like to say that AI is not an end. It's really a means to an end. And what really matters is for enterprises to be able to articulate, what is the purpose of AI? What problem are you trying to solve? So my question to all of you is, what are the most pressing challenges that you believe enterprises should be solving with AI today? And what challenges are you specifically focusing on in your work?
All right, I can start. I think this is a great way of starting with, lately, I've been in so many conversations with prospect customers, and one of the topics in the agenda is always, what's your plan to use generative AI?
Yeah.
And my first question back to them is, what's the problem that you would like to solve? Don't start with the technology, start with the problem, just like we do with building any innovative solutions. So when I look at the enterprises, when it comes to using AI, the challenge hasn't changed. Like with generative AI, it's still the data. You need to have a clean, transformed data that has high quality, that has enough versatility to be able to train the models. And this is actually where AtScale also comes in play, because the problem that AtScale focuses on is making the raw data business ready for wider consumption, for generation of insights. So AtScale sits on top of the cloud data platforms between the consumers and the raw data. And from the problem that we focus is making raw data business ready. And I just want to kind of really iterate, I'm not talking about making data analytics ready. I'm more talking about making data business ready. Because really the data, we have been all knowing like transforming data to make it analytics ready, but data needs to be business ready, needs to reflect the business context and the business moment, which is changing. And when you combine that with the problem of, AI also needs to have access to the business ready data to be able to generate the right insights. So I think like from a scale perspective and also like the overall trend that I'm seeing is just overall having the right data in place to be able to train the models. So I would say that is number one. And then the second thing that I would like to highlight is we have been thinking about AI in isolation. I think, if, a couple things if you want to take out from this panel is you have to really think about integrating that into the business processes. The insights generated from the AI needs to be available where the business users is to make, decisions. So, and when you think about that, I think that's another big area of challenge because many organizations are still on the legacy systems, and AI is this new shiny thing that kind of been done in isolation. That really needs to be integrated into business processes. Yeah.
Great points. Thank you.
I think for me, firstly, the potential impact of AI, at least, recently we've started to discuss where it could be impactful because we don't know, right? We are trying to figure out in our business. We are a public company with about 3,000 to 4,000 people and growing rapidly. So every department in our business is trying to figure out how can we leverage this, right? Today, just where the economy is and where the market is, eventually the conversation comes down to, productivity improvement for our employees and automation. How much of the things that we do can we automate, and how are the tooling and other things, how can they make our employees do more with less, right? So that's usually where the conversation is starting today. If you look at engineering, which is what I manage at Alteryx, we're about 1,000 people organization. If you look at engineering and you look at the life cycle of engineering and you look at the startups that we most engage with, they are the ones who are able to kind of directly tell us where the engineer's experience will improve, right? And engineers are usually writing code, testing, deploying, managing infrastructure, and generally, doing better collaboration, right? So there's some very obvious areas around co-pilots, et cetera, which can improve productivity. But really where we've gone deeper and have, at least I've had a greater interest in conversations is where there's examples of companies that are able to come, look at that whole engineering experience and say, hey, this is an area where I can paint a vision for you. It can be more automated, it can be more efficient. And, a smaller team of engineers with a smaller investment of money and time can do much more than they can do today. And I find my peers and other go-to-market and other organizations having a similar conversation. So I think eventually it's the same as it's always been with companies. They have to come and really be able to talk our language, in terms of our own productivity. With AI, it's just today it's hard sometimes to take the hype and map it to that real value. And the startups that can do that better, we have a deeper engagement with, essentially.
I just want to start with a disclaimer. I'm not with Adobe, so it means anything what I'm saying is not related to the company, but I share with experience working at Adobe and even for the other companies. The most pressing challenge or opportunity for companies is to differentiate themselves. I mean, AI is not new. From my point of view or my perspective is that every company wanted to differentiate. So when you approach to the problem, can AI help me differentiate in whatever I'm doing? It could be a services, product company, service offering or anything. So can I differentiate myself in the marketplace today with AI? You started the company and you have every business going on and so on, but AI can be a differentiator. Can I differentiate? So that's a hard pressing. So when your approach to the problem is that, can I take the AI and how I apply that into my product, my operations, and my customer relationship and so on? Can I improve? Can I accelerate? Can I automate? Can I make it easy? So that I can differentiate myself to be the leader in what I do? I see the three big things is that the opportunity with the AI. The good thing is that the AI is not new. It's just been talked, but now AI proved that it is easy to do today as compared to previously with the technology and with the platform and with the offerings available. So one is employee empowerment, right? So there are so many things can be done related to employee empowerment using the power of AI. In terms of, if you look at any company, the biggest balance sheet, if a company look at any company balance sheet, the biggest line item is the employee salaries and so on. If you just move the needle, if you just improve 1% in $1 billion company, it's $100 million. So you kind of make big impact just improving employee experience. Could be productivity, could be hiring, retention, communication, anything and everything related to the employee. That makes a big impact. The second is that every company or every enterprise need to deal with the customers. Can you do something about customer engagement? Can you, in terms of customer relationship, customer branding, customer acquisition, customer conversion, customer retention, renewals, and so on, every area part of it, can you do something better using the power of AI? And the third part is that the product innovation or product operations, it could be product or services. We are in the software companies, we build the products. Can my products better in using the power of AI? Can my product make it easy to connect, analyze, report, build an apps or anything and everything about? So can that AI be in the products? If you are just a car manufacturing company, can improve the car manufacturing processes with the power of AI in the product side of it. If you're a services company, can I do something better with the power of AI in the services? So I look at it as three paradigms: is employee, which improves the productivity and whatnot, and customer, manage the relationship, and the third one is the product efficiency. So the AI underlying the platform, you can build something and you can really, accelerate in all three areas.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Srini, to hear that also from your Adobe experience, because I think for most of us, when we think about Adobe, we think about the product implementation of AI. But to know that behind the scenes, the engineering leadership is also thinking about how to use AI for a lot of the internal operations is always interesting. Divya, I think I don't know if everyone's familiar with Alteryx, maybe just like one sentence, you can give kind of what problem is Alteryx trying to solve, and that might give us a little bit more context as we continue and maybe you can do the same also for at scale, just so.
I think Alteryx is a public data analytics company. Our focus is on upskilling thousands of users who sit in the business department. These are non-technical users who understand their business really well, but don't really understand data beyond maybe Excel. Like, they don't understand databases, they don't understand tables and schemas. How do we empower them to do more complicated analytics, automate their day-to-day processes that involve data very often and a lot? And how do we deploy AI and machine learning in a way that without needing to understand the depth of these things, they can actually deploy it and use it in their day-to-day workflows. We have kind of 500,000 active business users who are very loyal and passionate about how Alteryx can change their day-to-day lives. So that's really what is the core business and fit for Alteryx.
Yeah, so for its scale, I would say that there has been two gravity shift that was happening, right? One is the moving data to cloud, and then the second one is the insight gravity. So when I say insight gravity, every organization use multiple BI tools, multiple way of consuming insights generated by AI. So at scale sits in between the cloud data warehouses and all of that BI and AI consumption. And this is the semantic layer where you apply the business logic, do multidimensional, all-up-like transformation of the data. And at scale really opens up the power of all the cloud data by leaving the data at the cloud. And then by connecting to the BI and AI consumption, enable the business users or all of the analytics consumers to ask business questions, get the answer, by knowing that there's governance in place. So it's all about central governance with a metric store. As I mentioned, another important component is be able to do multidimensional analysis. And then the third component is, as all that consumption is happening for analytics, making sure that every query is optimized, not only for performance, but also for cost. So three components provided by the semantic layer that at scale provides. Of course, we have a product feature called AI Link that enables the data scientists to get connected to the semantic models, where the data already has a definition that they can use the same metrics and dimensions in their ML models to train. And then as they come up with new features, they can write those features back to the semantic model for a wider consumption by other data scientists. And also, importantly, they can write the predictions back to the data layer so that that predictive insights become consumable for any BI user.
Thank you. So this will start to play a role in some of the conversations and give you guys a little bit of context. DV, a question for you. As AI is getting more commoditized, we see everyone and their mother is using AI, and most of these services use the same LLMs, on fundamental LLMs underneath. how can enterprises differentiate if everyone's using all of these services, open source, private LLMs that are the same? And how can Alteryx help companies carve out some sort of unique offering if everyone's using the same underlying language models?
Right. I think, let's assume that the core infrastructure and premise of LLMs is commoditized, right? It's easily available to everybody. You can go to AWS and get it. Let's say we reach that point. We're probably still a little ways away from that because it just takes some effort to put all the AI infrastructure to use within your organization. But let's say we get there. I think the real value will come from bridging the gap between what the AI offers to what the person, the actual company or the business is trying to do, right? Now, not every company, every department, every organization is going to be able to take the AI and build their own use case to it, right? So that gap, that investment has to be lowered for wide adoption of AI. Every company has to be able to go and use this to really do what they want to do in minutes in the end, right? For that, somebody has to figure out what the problem is, how to solve it, and how exactly do I streamline that process of adoption for that user, right? And for Alteryx, for example, that comes from how does a non-technical user deploy and use LLMs in their own world and use it for their own automation as fast as possible, right? So for example, one thing we figured out is that often there's automation that companies are trying to do that is knowledge-oriented and is not possible by tools today. So for example, you are looking at an organization which has data. I mean, for engineering, you have tickets coming in from customers and you're trying to categorize them. Categorization, information extraction has always been a really deep investment, needs a very deep investment before it can be automated. We feel like generative AI can really lower the cost of automating those kinds of tasks. And when business users today are building automation with Alteryx, they can now, without knowing understanding how categorization is done, very trivially start to incorporate that piece of automation and remove those manual steps which needed, dealing with information in their day-to-day life and automate that, right? But will those business users go to the LLM to do it? No, right? We've got to bring it into their workflow and have them do it in their day-to-day life, and that's where we add value. We go to them and say, hey, you don't really need to understand anything. As you're working in your day-to-day life and automating things that you're building, you can now incorporate AI, and that's the value we add, right? We bridge the gap from the technical to the non-technical, and other startups or other larger companies are kind of bridging that gap in other ways, right? So even if the core piece is commoditized, I feel like there's always kind of a great value in the application layer, and there will be a variety around governance, and there's several other areas where you don't want companies to have to build it. They would prefer to kind of have someone do it for them, and it becomes cheaper for them overall.
Oh, interesting. Maybe relatedly, from an at-scale perspective, I know you guys help companies with governance, with quality of the data, with bridging across multiple data clouds that you might store. At the end of the day, AI is only as good as the data you run it on. And that's like the first question that I think every single company that says, I want to start using AI needs to answer is, what's my data strategy? Where am I going to get my data from? What's going to be my governance, my privacy, all my rules? What is your opinion on where you think companies should be getting their data from? What should they be worried about? And how crucial is the management and governance of the data when building out your data strategy?
Yeah, so great question. Just overall, I think, this issue with my microphone. So these challenges in terms of governance and also data quality is not new, right? With the BI analytics, we have been dealing with those things for 2 decades, more than 2 decades. It's just with AI, we just put those problems on steroid. So it's even much more important. So when it comes to really providing the governance, it comes, again, defining like what is the business definition for net revenue. Again, if you want to build models to predict the net revenue, you should have that governance in place and then have one place to define that logic on that data. And then the other thing that I would like to highlight, especially with LLM and the ChatGPT, like the answer should be like deterministic, and that is where the governance become very important. Like based on the prompt that you use when you ask a question with ChatGPT, the answer may differentiate, but if you use a semantic layer together with that, that is where the deterministic part can come, because then there will be one definition that the LLM model will learn from to generate that insight. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned, it is all of these technologies. They know the conversation side of it. They have been trained on the publicly available data, but they haven't really trained on business-specific, domain-specific data. That is where we see a great opportunity to leverage semantic models to define the business context to those LLM models, so that they can actually really understand what's the fiscal year for Home Depot. Home Depot is one of our customers, for example. So business context, being deterministic. And then the final thing I will say is explainability. Again, that's not something new. From the BI side, like we have been always answering the questions of the users. Okay, what's the definition of that KPI? Where the data come from? What's the data lineage? The same things apply to AI in a more larger scale. Now, when an insight has been generated, the users would like to know, okay, what data has been used? What was the data lineage? And what were the key drivers or the features that affect that prediction? So I would say that having the business context, making it more deterministic, and then being able to provide the explainability are the important components of that governance that comes with the semantic layer that we provide.
And the customers that you have right now, are most of them just leveraging their internal data from various data lakes all over their internal, like on-premise, off-premise? Or are you seeing a bigger trend of actually pulling together data from their own internal, plus buying data externally and trying to create? What's the trend that you see?
So it's mostly internal data that they have in their cloud data warehouses, but and with some of the catalog initiatives that we are seeing, there's more need that the enterprises realize that they need to have access to the external data to augment the data more. Like for supply chain, for example, could be third-party vendor data, or it could be better data. So there's the trend, there's more need to start combining the external data, and we kind of start seeing that on the cloud data warehouses providers as well. Like for example, Databricks they have their Unity catalog, and one of their components is to have a marketplace to open up to the external data sources.
Great. All right. So Srini, in the drive to incorporate more AI and machine learning, how did Adobe weigh the ROI of these investments? And can you share any instances where maybe the ROI was far beyond maybe what was expected?
Yeah.
Or worse?
Especially with the AI ML, the ROI always, the cost of doing business is very high as compared to other services. Querying a table, running a report, and showing the data versus running some predictable analytics or algorithms, getting the data what you wanted to really achieve. How do you really model train and operationalize? That's very expensive. So the ROI is definitely a challenge, but there are two ways we looked at the issue is to differentiate ourselves with the products what we offer in the marketplace to be the best. How we can help and empower our customers to use the technology to the best possible. So that's kind of giving us the leadership in our product offering, and also customer loyalty and customer retention, and you can always go back and upsell and so on. And then the second part of the ROI is that, can I do it faster, cheaper, and better with the quality? That's something, if you can fold that into the equation when you are doing, then that's a calculation. So when we are looking at, especially in market, or we were running a lot of campaigns and a lot of ad activities and so on, each lead costs you a lot. And somebody can unsubscribe, as simple as sending multiple emails and spamming people. And at least what they can do is, it's too many emails and I unsubscribe. So that lead could be very costly for you to unsubscribe or to lose. So using the AI to send at the time you wanted to send, and send the content which is personalized to the person who is interested. So there are a lot of things you can do to really retain the customer, but continue to send the messages what you wanted to do. So at the time of the day, which is pertinent to an individual, or content I like to see, and so on. So you can personalize it based on each individual at scale. That gives you the best
value for what you do with the AI.
So you guys were leveraging it to lower your CAC. That's where you got a lot of your ROI from.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. This one's for all of you. This is a question for all of you. It does seem like every other day there's a new AI startup that's popping up. And I'm sure there's actually a lot of really interesting ones that are here in the audience too today. So I'm really curious, what are the specific gaps that you each are seeing in your enterprise AI journey that you think some of the startups are best positioned to fill through partnerships that we might even make here today? What are you guys looking to buy versus to build?
Yeah, I can start. I think it's just being able to focus on a specific domain or like building solutions for a vertical is the need that I'm seeing, because like when I look at our customers, they know their business need, business definition, and they are able to apply that for retail, for finance, and there's a common pattern. Now there's that business ready data for those sectors, and to be able to apply AI to generate insights and then make those insights accessible to more users is the need that I see. So if you're thinking about building a solution, and more I'm thinking for generating insights, predictions, explaining what may happen and why it may happen. Just doing that for a specific domain will have high value. Maybe it can be like retail, it can be dynamic pricing, or you can think many examples. But I would say that focusing on a sector or industry, and then kind of think about what decisions needs to be made and how you can help the human with the data analysis on large scale make those decisions better.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of healthcare folks here in the audience.
Yeah,
so bringing some of the healthcare verticals on top of, it's very interesting. How about you?
The volume of let's say the startup reach outs has definitely gone through the roof through the last 6 months. I would say, one challenge that probably startups are running into, or at least I feel sitting on the other side, is, we haven't figured out what our strategies through generative AI is either, right? And making a point purchase on any one thing is super hard, because when you start looking at it, the question becomes why this and why not that, right? So I think the startups which I feel right now are kind of breaking through that noise are firstly the ones that are helping us shape that strategy, right? So they're doing thought leadership. They're talking about things in our language, so we can look at it and say, hey, you know what? This is what the future for our enterprise and operations looks like. And this seems to match thematically where the thought leadership from this startup is coming out into, right? So I think the more you can kind of align on that, that's much better, right? Because very rarely are startups yet figuring out what the exact pain point in AI mapping is. So direct pain point, like if you're just trying to target like based on features and all, it just gets lost in the noise. Everybody's talking about co-pilots, everybody's talking about some kind of a chatbot. It's very hard. So for us, it's about shaping that strategy and saying, hey, where and how will we deploy generative AI? And then finding companies who match with the way we think about the world. In engineering, for example, when we look at the way we are thinking about generative AI is we look at, the life, we call it the developer experience, but we look at the end-to-end experience of a developer from the time they start to build something, the collaboration they have to do, the test and deploy, and, the usual engineering metrics remain the same. We want to do faster CI/CD, we want to do lower cost, we want to deploy it faster. I think the question we are asking is which of those steps can truly be transformed by generative AI? And the blockers of us not automating them earlier weren't that there wasn't AI, it was something else. It was organizational friction, because you can apply it to anything, but we want to pick the ones which are most ripe for kind of for transformation. So I think that's what we are building out. We are saying, here's the developer experience. Here's the area, for example, where developers have to interact with knowledge the most. For example, a lot of time goes in meetings and you don't have context for a developer sometimes. So the more can AI provide more context, right? When we look at co-pilots, we're again looking at which tools can truly have a co-pilot experience that will be productive and won't be just a feature we add that nobody will use, right? And we can't do trials on 50 co-pilots across everybody, right? Every tool we use as a co-pilot being sold. So I think so. Again, I'll just go back to that. So we need a strategy on our side that we can map, our needs into. And then if you can shape that strategy, you will be in conversation on day one or when the strategy comes around, if you're talking the language that a strategy has, you'll kind of shine through, right? Hopefully. Yeah.
And is there any examples that you guys have run into where in your analysis of all the pain points that you currently have, a startup has come in and offered a solution that really addresses one of the pain points?
I think I'll give two examples, right? One in the governance space, right? So when we are buying all of these the third-party software which is doing generative AI, we have our own concerns around privacy and data, etc. And our own legal team has to still figure out what is the meaning if we sign a contract with GitHub Copilot and our code is now going to GitHub. What should we care about, right? So there is a startup out there, Credo.ai, I can even name them. I think they're kind of shaping the conversation around governance in such a way that we align with their thought process on that. So that has led them, not that we've made a purchase, but it has led us to be kind of there. So that's the thought leadership and how it matches us and kind of goes around. So that's one example. And then secondly, as we're kind of identifying pieces within our own area, we are finding areas that we want to invest in, but haven't been able to because they're lower priority for us. And one area has been accessibility and localization. And we feel like it's an area where accessibility and localization is ripe for disruption, identified by us. We would like to invest in it, but we haven't been able to, and we are looking for someone who can say, hey, earlier you needed X million of investment to do this well for your company, but maybe now you can do it with hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So again, if a startup is in that space and can talk that language and shows that ROI, it makes it very clear. And there's a few startups who've been able to kind of message it in the way that we are thinking about it. And you can take that from accessibility and localization to anything that engineering teams will typically build when they're building enterprise software, and you'll find that.
That's a great example, DV. I think so much engineering goes into extending products to make them accessible and create various variations, globalization. If there's a way to use AI to solve that, that would drive massive efficiency. That's a great example. Did you want to answer that question too?
I agree with DV. I mean, I think there is a lot of confusion, a lot of excitement and an opportunity AI is giving to everybody, but also created a lot of confusion on naming AI for everything, right? So, I think that's, when you hear the story about, startup pitching the stories, like it's sometimes even questioning is that what are you differentiating yourself from just on OpenAI?
Yeah.
Oh, I can summarize it for you. I can give you a Q&A. I can pump the data into generative AI
There's
or
50 of
OpenAI.
those. 50
Still
of
get
those.
all these answers. Why do I need you? If you can do the same thing. So unless you really give that end-to-end solution or a business value, you can plug that into an enterprise. It could be, again, I go back to the three things, right? An employee experience or employee engagement perspective, customer engagement, and then the product operations. So if you package your story or your value with taking the power of AI, and then you say that, hey, this is what I can help you. It could be in hiring. A lot of times, hiring is an expensive problem for many organizations. I can give you this AI, can help you find the talent and can help you in the hiring side of it. Employee retention, employee empowerment, co-piloting in various things. It could be, writing the code, testing the applications and so on. And the same thing with the customers and production. So I see that if you just try to sell AI as a technical service, then you need to differentiate yourself as an infrastructure service or core LLMs as you're competing with AWS and so on. Or you're selling a value on top of LLMs available in the market, but that value is really packaged to solve his business problems, so that the companies need not to think about how do I take this and plug that into my business model. So you go to the market and say, going back to the example of hiring, you say, hey, you know what, our solution can take the AI and plug that into your workday, and as you create the requisition, it can do 10 things for you. Wow, okay, then it makes sense. So I don't need to really see how this AI can fit into the problem. So I think that's something I kind of see that as take the technology, but think from a value proposition. Again, it's a fundamental question is also, is it the AI we need to apply this logic to? It's the same logic you apply when you are pitching your startup idea or solution to any enterprise. You go with the problem statement on how you're trying to address. AI is a new B today, but it is the same how you approach earlier, right? So if you just go as a technology provider, or you need to differentiate with the technology provider. I think analytics solutions, they give you end-to-end analytics, right? Or if you go to Adobe, give you end-to-end creative tools. So just give your product to the best and package that into the applications.
It's interesting. All three of you you effectively said the same thing in 3 different ways, and that is, you're all hearing from a lot of these vendors, but if those vendors want to successfully infiltrate, they need to answer a very specific question of what are they going to drive better, cheaper, faster in the problem spaces that you have. So
it's funny because, a year and a half ago, I was, for those, I joined Alteryx as part of an acquisition. So I was a founder at an enterprise startup. And at the time, I was constantly trying to think, how do we, how do we go to market and talk in the language of the customer and not in the language of our own product? And it's super hard, right? When I'm on the other side now, I'm looking at startups who come and talk to us and I'm like, hey, they're not talking in our own language, and when I'm trying to help them, I'm trying to tell them, but it's just sometimes very hard because everybody has their own strategy, everybody talks in their own language. So I think finding that, bridging the gap from what you're building to what I'm doing is what helps you shine through, and finding what I'm doing in a way that it's applicable to all of us. I think that's what I would say really matters for a startup.
Another thing I also wanted to add is that today the AI gives a lot of excitement, but also a lot of nervousness, right? So as he was talking about is, if I connect my Git into the Copilot, what's going to happen? We have seen the incidents with the Samsung and others, I will really have a guardrails. So when you propose the solution to the enterprise, you clearly talk about the guardrails with the technology, because customers are already clear about what AI can do for them, right? The value it can bring to the table, but they're also concerned about the risk it can bring to the table too. So if you can address that upfront, that hey, we offer you this capability with this kind of guardrails around it, it makes the other person's life easier.
So let's lean into that. Actually, this question goes back to you. Let's lean into that. So given the challenges that we're seeing in the AI space, and the real concerns that people have with finding the right AI talent to build their AI, the governance, the ethics, the privacy, the macroeconomic challenges, what's your recommendation for how any AI-powered startup should be set up and build for long-term growth?
I'm at the junction right now, leaving the company and thinking about starting the next one. So these are all the common questions about how do I attract the talent? How do I really differentiate myself? How do I really... So the simple things is either AI, again, I go back, this is maybe third time I'm thinking about the startup and not in the first time, but every decade, right? When you're .com, when you're connected the applications onto the web, was the exposure risk of challenge in a way. Cloud, when you're SaaSifying applications is the thing. Now you're applying AI to the applications, it gives you the new opportunity and also gives the new challenges. So when you're thinking about solving this, it's not the same the way you solved before. It has to be done differently. Culturally, you need to think about different. So there is a simple way to tell them, and I was telling myself and my kids, is that in a typical applications, anything you offer, you store A as an attribute value into the table, you query, you get the A as a return, right? So then you can make sense. You can commit to a business decision or you can do anything about it. But with the AI, you didn't get the A. You may get something else, a variation to the A. There are a lot of influencing factors. You can do a prompt engineering, you can train differently to give you different value to it. So the A is transformed into something else. How can you really rely on the data, what AI can give you, right? So the prediction, it could be search, it could be recommendations or so on. How do you really make sure that the data is there? So when you're attracting the talent, when you're solving a business problem, when you're approaching this as a value, and then how do you differentiate yourself in the marketplace that you're not confusing yourself with the technology provider or the apps? So fitting all of this together is the company.
I would say for us, when I look at the skill sets, it's just thinking with design thinking is very important. We have a tendency that data engineers, data scientists, they all deal with the data, but at the end, the problem that you are trying to solve is for humans. So I think it is very important that you always train yourself with design thinking, and then you put the user and the problem first. So when I'm talking to engineers, I lead the product, so I don't interview much, but when I'm talking to engineers, that is kind of the first thing that I look at, okay, how fast this person can understand that business problem, and how fast they can put their self in the shoes of the user who's really going to use that solution augmented with AI to solve the problem.
Yeah, very well said. So Elif, let's continue on this topic. As we look at the potential of foundation models, interacting with all the organizational data, which is kind of the world you live in. What's your vision of an ideal infrastructure, and what's kind of keeping you up at night?
I think what keeps me up is just overall, as I mentioned, it's just like the problems that we have been always having in the BI world are now on steroid with AI. So if at scale generated insights is not the accurate one, or it's not the single version of truth, this is kind of what really makes me nervous. Like whatever models we use within at scale as part of our semantic model, like really should be explainable and understandable. That should have the data lineage capability where you can track back to what data has been used and what the process it has gone. So I would say, that's really kind of my concern. The other thing is that always, again, I'm going back to human. Like collaboration is very important. And I think with every solution that we have been building, we always miss that collaborative side of the humans. None of the humans make decisions themselves. I wish at home I can make the decision, but I need to ask my husband, not need, but collaborate with him. Just my point is, when you think about this whole data pipeline, getting raw data, making it insights ready, there's so much personas working on that. And if you can also think about how you can make more collaboration in your environment, where they can actually, the data scientists can more easily work with the business users to understand their problem, to build the right model. That's important. And I don't see much that type of collaborative thinking in the solutions that we build.
That's interesting. What's keeping you up at night from this perspective?
I think from a generative AI perspective, right now, I feel like governance is really the most difficult question, right? So, and maybe I'll give an example there, right? So I think you look at, let's say, an insurance company, right, which is trying to process customer data around, and starts to deploy generative AI. To the point he was making, the answers are, not only are the answers, unpredictable, but the question is, let's say the generative AI doesn't do well in a certain set of rare diseases, right, for health insurance. How does that impact which customers are getting the right insurance answers or not? Bias is a big problem, right? So, and some of these limitations are technical in nature, right? Explainability and bias and all really haven't been figured out. There's investment going in, but they haven't been figured out. There's also legal landscape is not clear. If I'm generating code from GitHub Copilot, who owns the IP? And will a case come in the future which will change that, right? So the legal landscape is not clear. The governance landscape is not clear. So all of that is really making it difficult both to adopt it as well as to sell it, right? And I think that's a challenge because honestly, that landscape is not going to get clear fast enough. And so the most important thing is to break through in that murky landscape, right? So for that, we've got to figure out, we've got to convince our legal teams internally when we are buying software, and we've got to paint a picture for them. And as technical leaders, it's on us to kind of help the legal systems, the government systems, on how do they think about this technology in a way that we can start to adopt it before they get all the answers right. And I think that gap hasn't been bridged well enough. So for me, that is the biggest problem in adopting it internally, and that's the biggest problem in us taking this to our customers. We mostly focus on large enterprises where this is a larger problem. So in large enterprises, I think, and mid to large enterprises, this is going to be, I think, the biggest roadblock to kind of mass adoption of this technology.
And regulatory changes that are coming down the pipe are going to play a very big role in the conversations you have with legal around
Absolutely.
what can and can't. So we only have like 2 minutes left. Just to close it off, Srini, maybe you can...
I can add a few things on there. So it's like, AI, with other systems, you can, in the production, if something goes wrong, you can quickly fix it. But with the AI, to fix the same way, the same expectations is not the same. So it takes things differently. So a lot of, hallucination, the bias data and so on, how do you really test the systems or models, which is kind of give you the best data possible? It's still, it's a kind of a concern. The second concern is that, when you vendor lock in, we try to build applications. So you wanted to have a foundation layer, which is kind of give you an abstraction, but give you the same outcome as you expect. And, you could be working with the Google, you could be working with Microsoft or others. So you have the flexibility to change and differentiate yourself today. You may leverage something out there in the market, but then you wanted to differentiate. So how you really build a system which is flexible to bring in your own innovation on top of the models you have it today, because you know that it's going to be expensive and you can't just continue to rely on the infrastructure provider. So those kind of things I kind of to continue to look at.
Thank you. So I think we're out of time, but I just wanted to thank the panelists for joining us today. And as you can tell, there's a lot of complexity in how AI is landing across enterprises, lots of variation in how we're using it, a lot of problems still to be solved. And with that, I think we'll move on to the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.